stop. And I thought, oh, stop. You can't do that.
Did you get a nap this afternoon?
No.
Too much to do, eh?
Yep.
From now on.
From now on, yeah.
I hear a train. I guess who's on the other side of it?
Jimmy?
Probably.
So have you heard from Jimmy recently?
No.
So they had 69 closed for when Jimmy came this morning, just the last few miles. And then when he went to go home, they still had it closed. There must have been. Nothing, he looked online, didn't find anything. You know, that was like 3 hours or so.
Yeah.
So,
Fatality, that's the case.
hard to know.
Your shiny toes, Tim.
Good afternoon. That was like a really good use of your afternoon. I wish I could use mine that way.
At least I get the seat and not the floor. Poor Beth, she's got to go out to the parking lot in the dark. She slept a lot this afternoon. I don't need her like she does.
I'm balancing out our video over here.
Well, I don't want the,
Because it catches,
oh, I was saying, I don't want the church to tip over.
we wouldn't want that.
No, even virtually.
Oh, it's
When they get married, when Julie next get married, we should make it run with Julie.
well, that's
Never be it.
I know, but it's
That's
funny.
Yeah. She won't be alone.
So I heard a train just a moment ago.
I
So
know.
I
Yeah,
figured-
I saw a tree.
I figured Jenny's probably on the other side of it.
Definitely like it.
Oh, did I put the hymn books away? Was I not supposed to do that? Let's put two
I haven't
back. I got one here and there's two up there and there's one on the pulpit.
There's two. Oh, yeah.
Might be the one on the boat, but I might have brought it up with me. I've been known to do that.
Hang on to it.
Do you want me to do number 82? I might be able to do that one.
Is that for the congregation or is that a solo?
Yeah. If you want to do it,
Well, I don't, but I want to listen to you play. You should go. They're unanimous.
I figure he'll be here any minute. What?
I was showing my, I'm not talking to you. Get out of my conversation.
I need a new watch.
Actually, I haven't. I just have
81, Mom, when we,
I'm there.
okay,
Spacious garage.
all right. I don't either. Yeah, I don't know it.
There's no long line of tail lights going north, so I think it must still be going.
Oh, we could always do the Bible study and sing at the end.
It's up to you.
Sure.
Got a book for that too.
All right. Well, you can prepare.
2 books.
So we're going to finish by singing instead of starting with singing. We'll wait for Jimmy to get here. We'll go ahead and do our Bible study. So we are in Isaiah chapter 17. So we've been working at surrounding Israel. Who have we surrounded them with so far?
That had the walls.
The burdens,
The
yep.
burden, the first one was Babylon, which at that point was just a city, but it was a big wall. So when they get a big nation, then they'll get a big wall.
And also woven into that was Assyria, the woe that it was going to face.
Yeah.
Because he's looking way in the future, but before that, Assyria is going to get what's coming to them too. So, okay, so we've got Babylon and Assyria.
Babylon, Assyria. And then was Moab next? Oh, yeah, the Philistines.
The Philistines,
And then Moab.
and then Moab. And that's where we finished. What's that? No, that would be a good choice, though, wouldn't it? Because they're right back there.
They're right beside Moab.
Yeah, which actually we left the Moabites in Edom because
Yeah,
they
were
fled.
running- They were running across.
Yeah. And Moab was different than the Philistine or the Babylon because there was a lot more sorrow,
More what?
a lot more sorrow. Where God speaking through Isaiah was like sorrowful that they were going to have to be punished, because there's connections all the way through, including Ruth being in the line of Christ, who was from Moab. And so you definitely saw a different tone. So now we come to chapter 17, and who's the burden? The burden of
Damascus.
Damascus. So Damascus sounds familiar. I mean, sometimes, especially some of the cities and so on, the fields, I'm just looking at the prior chapter, the fields of Heshbon and the vine of Sibmah, where and what's Heshbon and Sibmah?
Well, I don't know about that, but Damascus is the capital city of Syria. The country.
In current day Syria.
It still is.
Yeah. So that's a name that wow, that's like a real place. Well, so are all the other places. It's just some of them have been lost to history. But yeah, Damascus is the current capital of Syria, and it was the capital of Syria then. And part of the reason was its location. So, we kind of, Syria's up here, somewhere here in this range, but our map is really compressed. Okay, Jimmy's here now. Our map is really compressed from the Jordan River over, because if Israel is 35 miles across at its widest point, well, this whole region between the Jordan River and Babylon was far greater than 35 miles. So we've really crunched it, and it throws off where Syria is. But Syria is about 130 miles from Jerusalem. So the top of Jerusalem up here is, like 60 some miles, or the top of Israel is like 60 miles from Jerusalem. You're talking another 70 miles this way is where Damascus was. But then now we're getting into the Assyria range. So our map is really scrunched. I can't even blame it on, Mercator projection or anything like that. It's just I'm trying to fit a lot into our auditorium. So, Jimmy, why don't we go ahead and sing a song, and we'll jump back in. I just gave the preview trailer. and then we'll jump back into our study.
2 trains. I saw the trains and I went, yeah, maybe those trains.
Number 81. One that's not on the stump.
Oh, we're about to.
Oh, we'll know it now.
Hymn number 81. The spacious firmament on high.
Do we know this?
No,
So we're singing it anyway.
Jimmy's gonna play it through once for us so we can hear it.
God's creation tells his work.
Yeah.
I mean, not only is it his handiwork, but it says, here, look what God made. Here we are.
I'm gonna believe let's see, Joseph Addison, is that the,
That's the lyrics.
That's the lyricist.
Okay.
I'm gonna make the assumption he was a younger creationist.
I got hung up on ethereal. They spread it out so far, and I thought eternal. So we say with Eve, what is this word? This is not the word that I thought it was.
And utter forth a glorious voice, forever singing as they shine. The hand that made us is divine.
All right. How about number 82? Praise to the Lord Almighty. Number 82.
You know
I
this
think we
one.
might know this one.
Yeah, and this is a familiar tune once you get into it.
You'll recognize this one, honey, once we start.
And then number 83, chiefest of 10,000. Number 83.
I need to play through this one last week.
Okay.
So we're gonna do this.
That's okay.
was fun. That was worth waiting for the train.
That wasn't the one I was offering to play.
Oh, let's see. Let's see. So, Damascus is up here, quite a ways up here, but only because we have to sort of shift things around. But somewhere up here is Damascus. It was about a 6-day journey from Jerusalem, not by car, not by plane, by foot. You know, and you can do that now on Google Maps. You can find out how long it would take.
Put in Shank's ponies, and then it tells you.
Wow, they have different choices. You can go in driving car or walking or
Biking, yeah.
or public transport.
So I don't think they used bikes in those days, so we're probably back to walking. So about a 6-day journey. It was about 50 miles from the Mediterranean coast. So again, if the widest part of Israel was 35 miles, it was on this side, up here. It was a leading commercial and transportation city. And the reason why was the location. There were 2 major rivers that flowed through it. The Abana, which is now called Barada, and the Farpar, which I don't know what it's called now. And there were 2 major highways. Now, one of them you're going to recognize, the King's Highway. And the King's Highway went this way, and then the Via Maris went that way, and it was like right at the crossroads. So you've got river transportation, you've got major highways, and it's right there in the center. So guess who was raking in the big money? Damascus. Let's see, we know it from several reasons. In Genesis chapter 14, so who would be a primary character in Genesis 14? Abraham. So Abraham's nephew Lot got carried off. Remember that? And Abraham had to go rescue him. Guess where they ended up at? Damascus. And then Eliezer, who was Abraham's chief steward, he was Eliezer from Damascus. And so we're starting to see some overlap here. And then Damascus, throughout Israel's history, sometimes allied with the northern kingdom, sometimes with the southern kingdom, sometimes with the entire kingdom. So there's a lot of overlap. And so you see a lot of references. And then, of course, this is a woe. So what are you going to guess is going to happen to Damascus?
Oh, it's awful.
Uh-huh.
It's bad.
And it's going to be
Well, yeah.
destroyed.
Yeah, it'll be flat.
But it's going to come back. Now, why would it come back?
Well, it's in such a good location.
Exactly. You're going to rebuild. And it comes back. And how do we know that? Because that's where Paul's conversion took place, was on his way to Damascus. So there's lots of biblical history with this city, the capital of Syria. And at the current time, when we first started looking here in Isaiah, and at the time of Ahaz, Syria was allied with who?
Israel.
And represented by which, Judah represented the southern tribes.
And
Who represented? Ephraim, exactly. So Ephraim and Damascus were allied against who?
Judah.
Against Judah.
Yeah.
And so that's why Ahaz was, what can I do? Oh, I know. I'll form an alliance with these friendly people. The Assyrians,
They're
yes.
worse than the Syrians. Let's get them.
And so that's who we're talking about here. And it was even today, it's known as one of the most beautiful cities in that part of the world. And it was known the same back then. And so let's take a look. Chapter 17 of Isaiah, verse 1, the burden of Damascus. And it was a burden to Isaiah to have to give this. I mean, this is bad news. And unless you really hate somebody, nobody wants to give someone bad news. That's hard. And if you hate somebody enough to want to give them bad news, you have serious issues. You got serious heart issues. So this burden that Isaiah has to give to Damascus, the burden of Damascus, and he said, behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city. Okay. So in our, where in America, basically, and it depends from, I don't know, from state to state or whatever, but usually becoming a city requires what? A certain population. And if you're not that, then you're, I don't know the order, but you're a town, you're a village, you're a corner. They weren't going to be a city. So it's taken away from being a city, and it shall be a ruinous heap. Now, just a reminder, who is it that's going to take out the Assyrians to fulfill this? I'm sorry, I just gave it away. Who's going to take out the Syrians? The Assyrians, exactly. Who were, a kind, gentle people. We've studied before. It was all out warfare, men, women, and children. If they didn't kill you, they pulled out your tongue and they gouged out your eyes, which left you ineffective to fight against them. They weren't nice people, to the point that somewhat similar to Masada, which wasn't the Assyrians, but some cities, when they were surrounded by the Assyrians or the Assyrians were coming, they made the decision to what? Mass suicide. So this is a burden. This is a woe. It's going to be a ruinous heap. Well, what would be the ruinous heap? Well, first of all, the walls. You knock down the city's walls, you just knock down its defense. And we can throw in there the gates. All of its fortifications are destroyed. And once they're destroyed, what's to stop them from destroying everything inside? And, you think of, Titus taking out Jerusalem, and it took. Exactly. And so it's just going to be a ruinous heap. And then we come to the cities of Aurora are forsaken. They shall be for flocks, which will lie down, and none shall make them afraid. So we do know the cities of Aurora. So this is not the name of a city. These were the province, the cities that made up the province around Damascus throughout Syria. So it's not just the capital city that's destroyed, but the cities around it are forsaken. What's that mean, forsaken?
Abandoned.
Yeah, the people ran away, or they were killed, or they were taken captive and deported to other places. To the point where what happened here in verse 2?
Flocks laid down, and there was no people around to scare them off.
Yeah, if a flock comes into your backyard, you're going to do what? Shoot, get out of here. You're going to look for the shepherd. There wasn't a shepherd. There wasn't anybody guarding the backyard. The flocks went wherever they wanted. They probably went in your house, what was left of it. What's that imply? There's no people. And then we come to verse 3. The fortress also shall cease from Ephraim. So the fortress is going to cease from Ephraim, and it's going to cease from the kingdom, and the kingdom's going to cease from Damascus. They were allies. At this time, the stronger ally was Syria. So when you destroyed Damascus, what happened to Ephraim?
Well, there's no one left to stick up for you.
They crumbled. Their fortresses were destroyed. Their defense was destroyed. And the remnant of Syria, they shall be as the glory of the children of Israel, saith the Lord of hosts. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, until you realize the children of Israel just got wiped off the map.
Uh-huh. And so it's a little bit satirical, maybe, a little bit, it's not tongue in cheek. I mean, it's a burden, but it's like, it comes across that way a little bit, doesn't it?
Okay.
But what were the Syrians and the 10 northern tribes doing?
God's will.
God's will, but they were also attacking,
Jerusalem.
yeah, God's chosen, where, they're attacking Judah.
I just mean, God used
Absolutely.
them.
Yes.
These countries, he used them to execute his judgment upon people who needed it.
But he used
So
their
he
hardness.
he used the Assyrians to accomplish his will with Syria and Ephraim. But then he used Babylon to execute his will against Assyria. And then he used the, Medes and Persians to execute his
Uh-huh.
judgment, his right judgment.
And I think you kind of skipped over because you nailed it exactly. God was judging Syria and Ephraim because they were going up against Judah. Judah was the one that God chose for his son to be descended from. And so was he using them all? Was God using their actions against Judah to judge Judah? Yeah. But were the Syrians?
He judged Syria and Ephraim, but then he also judged Judah.
Right. I mean,
So,
God is a just God, and each one of them deserved. None of this was undeserving,
Yeah.
and none of this was God. You made us do it.
no.
They chose. They hardened their heart, and yeah, maybe then God hardened their heart, just like we read in Exodus. But nonetheless, there's no people. By the way, we see a partial fulfillment of this in 2 Kings. Turn with me there to 2 Kings chapter 15. Keep your finger in Isaiah. 2 Kings chapter 15 and let's see, verse 29. Let me see. This doesn't look at all right what I'm looking at because I'm in 1 Kings. I'm going, that doesn't look. 15 and verse 29. You want to go ahead and read that for me, Beth?
In the days of Pekah, king of Israel, came Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, and took Ijon and Abel-Beth-Maachah, and Jonah, and Kadesh, and Hazor, and Gilead, and Galilee, all the land of Naphtali, and carried them captive to Assyria.
Okay, so this is a partial fulfillment of this at the time of King Ahaz. So it's not going to be. It'll be fulfilled further in the time of Hezekiah, and then there's some that say there's even still a future fulfillment of it. I don't know that it necessarily has to be, but we certainly have a pattern for that with the burdens, where there was an immediate one and then there was a long-term one. So I'm comfortable with that, but I don't know that it has to be. By the way, something that may sound familiar, more so to Tom and Cindy and Joan and me than the rest of you, even Bethany. If I say Golan Heights, does that ring any bells?
Yeah, it's in Palestine, modern day.
It's up by this direction. And it was the 6-Day War, where Israel claimed it back. And by the way, President Donald Trump was the first president to recognize it as belonging to Israel. So this area is still debated and fought over and so on. That was back in 1967. So we were pretty young. We probably don't remember it from then. Joan, you might remember it, but you young kids, nah, not a chance. So anyway, so the fortress seats, they're destroyed. The glory of Syria matches the glory of Israel, which there is none because they've been destroyed. And then we come back to Isaiah, and now I got to get back there. Isaiah chapter 17 and verse 4. And it shall come to pass that the glory of Jacob shall be made thin, and the fatness of his flesh shall wax lean. And it shall be as when the harvestman gathereth the corn, and reapeth the ears with his arm. And it shall be as he that gathereth ears in the valley of Rephaim. And we're going to stop right there. So this is talking about the glory of Jacob. Now, Jacob, of course, was one of the patriarchs of all of Israel. But at least at this point, the 10 northern tribes are looking a little skeletal. Skeletal. They're starving. They're thin. There's no. And the best picture that comes to mind is if you've ever seen somebody battling cancer or some similar disease, whereas you knew them before the disease and they were healthy and maybe being an American, they carried a little bit of extra flesh here and there. And then you go see them a few months later and they're just, I mean, what's the phrase we use? Skin and bones. That's the picture here. They're dying. They're just skin and bones. They're made thin. The fatness of his flesh shall wax lean. And it says, when the harvestman gathereth the corn and reapeth the ears with his arm, and recognize oftentimes corn can refer to any of the products of the field. The picture that I see here is more the reaper coming in and cutting down, and you bundle the wheat or whatever other product, produce it is. You bundle in this hand, you cut and bundle, and then you carry it over. The Assyrians are doing that. They're coming through. They're chopping down Israel. They're chopping down Syria. They're gathering it all together, and they're doing it. Hang on a second. Yes. Rephaim, I had to look because I forgot where this was. This is southwest of Jerusalem, Rephaim. So they've come all the way through here. Because remember where the Assyrians end up against Judah. They're standing on the hill next to Judah, looking down on them, saying, what, did the gods of Syria save them? Did the gods of these people save them? You think your God's going to save you? Well, they not only made it to Judah, they made it to the southwest of Judah, which is the start to surround Judah. And they came through, and it's like you go into a field after it's been harvested, and what's left?
Not much.
Yeah, stubble.
Yeah.
We're going to see a little bit left.
Well, sometimes there are. I mean, when you cut grain, sometimes some of it falls on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
When you're holding a whole big arm, you're not going to bend over and pick up one little stalk.
Mm-hmm.
If you do, you might drop 7, or.
And thinking back to the story of Ruth,
Yeah.
what else might be left?
The corners
The corners, for what purpose?
that help people like Ruth.
Yeah, the gleaners, the ones who would come and take what, of what was left, they would take that to provide for themselves. Or, of course, in the case of Boaz, leave a little extra. And that's exactly what's happened here. God allowed the Assyrians, used the Assyrians to accomplish his purpose. But in verse 6, yet gleaning grapes shall be left in it. What's that mean?
What does it say that again?
Gleaning grapes shall be left in it.
Oh, they left some grapes behind
Yeah.
for people to glean, or people who had nothing to sustain themselves.
Exactly. So in this case, it's the Assyrians are flattening Israel and Syria, but there were a few what?
Israelites were left.
Yeah, there was a remnant, a very small remnant,
Yeah.
and they quickly became assimilated into the other peoples that the Assyrians brought in, but there was a remnant. So it says the gleaning grape shall be left in it, as the shaking of an olive tree. There may be 2 or 3 berries in the top of the uttermost bough, or there are 4 or 5 in the outmost fruitful branches thereof, saith the Lord God of Israel. You shake it and catch everything that comes off, and there's always those few that they're stuck up there, and okay, you could get the ladder, climb up there and get them, but you're going to say, oh no, we'll just leave those for the gleaners. Well, God said that's what happened. Now, how would that happen with the Assyrians?
Well, when they would come into a town, their intent was to kill or capture. So there would be none left. But what if you hid? What if you weren't where you're supposed to be? What if you're a kid, you're supposed to be guarding the flocks, they came and stole your flock, but you were down at the swimming hole,
So it pays to skip out on your work.
Well, maybe.
Once in a while, yeah, right.
I mean,
Maybe you're traveling, or maybe
Right,
you heard them coming and got
Ran
back
away.
and died.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you had a cave to hide in.
Right, so there could be a few, even though their habit was to come in and kill 3/4 of the people and then take the remaining 25% and haul
Right.
them off.
Right.
you know, if I was walking home, and walking was the way to go back then, you're walking home and you hear, you know, ching,
Yeah,
ching,
and it's going to talk about that in just in verse 12.
of, you know, horses, hooves, and people.
And screaming, yeah, and you see
shouting.
smoke,
Turn around and go the other
smoke
way.
and fire, and
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I would not go home and see what was happening until it was very quiet.
exactly. So there was a handful of people left. We don't know how many, but there were some that survived. And this is the neat thing. At that day shall a man look to his maker, and his eye shall have respect to the Holy One of Israel. What do they say? There's no atheists in foxholes. But God's mercy is shown. God could have let the Assyrians kill every single man, woman, child, baby. He could have, but he preserved some. And the result is some of them turned back to God. Now, had they been obeying God before that? No, they were worshiping false gods. They allied themselves against Judah. You know, they weren't following God's direction. But the result of this, what did we read this morning? Romans 8:28, and all things, what was that?
All things work together for good.
Yeah, to them that love God, which again, that's actually directed to us, the church. But does the principle apply to, you know, God has a good purpose even in terrible things. And then verse 8, and he, because this person who's now looking to his maker, who's respecting the Holy One of Israel, he shall not look to the altars. Well, what's wrong with the altar?
The altars of false gods.
Exactly. The altars of false God. The work of his hands, there are those false gods. This is my God. I made him myself. Neither shall respect that which his fingers have made, either the groves. What were the groves?
Idols.
Yeah, worshiping idols in areas with trees and so on, or the images. And so there's going to be a positive result from this, but nonetheless, it was a burden, an overwhelming loss. Verse 9, continuing on then, in that day shall his strong cities, Israel and Syria, but now it's kind of shifted gears to Israel, shall be as a forsaken bough and an uppermost branch which they left because of the children of Israel, and there shall be desolation. So we have this image of an old dying tree, you know, and it's got like one old branch at the top, and maybe there's like 3 leaves on it. You know, that's it. Just this old dying tree.
It says that they left them for Israel. They left because of the children of Israel. So there must have been some sustenance.
Right. Yeah. Again, God is a merciful God, even in judgment. And those I think who repented and survived, and not necessarily always did, you know, I'm sure there were some who repented and didn't survive, and there were probably some who survived and didn't repent. But God is merciful, and he does provide. But there shall be desolation, it says. Why? Because thou hast forgotten the God of thy salvation, and hast not been mindful of the rock of thy strength. Therefore shalt thou plant pleasant plants, and shall set it with strange slips. What do you think strange slips are? They're plants.
They're cuttings.
They're cuttings that they're going to plant, but why are they strange?
They're different from what you normally would plant.
Okay.
Probably because your regular crops and garden vegetables are unavailable.
So that's a really good conclusion. But I think this actually is going back to before the destruction, because it says, because thou hast forgotten the God of thy salvation, has not been mindful of the rock of thy strength, you're going to do this, and this is going to happen. So I think it's actually stepping back and explaining why it happened, because they were planting pleasant plants. That doesn't sound like subsistence planting. That sounds like they were ordering special plants from, sent over from, I don't know, Assyria or what, they were ordering from the special catalog. And strange slips, again, would be not just the common food, but they were ordering the special, I'm not enough of a horticulturist to even name anything, but I guess I can go back to the tulip bulb craze, where tulip bulbs became worth fortunes. They were buying the fancy stuff and planting it, They were allying themselves with Syria and planning to take their vengeance on Judah. They have all these plans in mind, but what happens? In the day shalt thou make thy plant to grow. So you plant it, you fertilize it, you weed it. And in the morning thou shalt make thy seed to flourish. So you're taking care, you're watering it. But the harvest shall be a heap in the day of grief and of desperate sorrow. So this is, you set out to accomplish for whatever, just the destruction of Judah. You got all these plans, but the end result is your harvest nothing. We see a hint of that. Take your Bible. I'm just going to let one of you read it for me. Haggai chapter 1 and verse 6. First person there, go ahead and read it. I'm going to turn to Haggai. Haggai chapter 1 verse 6. I'm going to turn to Luke chapter 5. So first person to Haggai, go ahead and read that for us.
Ye have so much and bring in with it. Ye eat, but ye have not enough. Ye drink, but ye are not filled with drink. Ye clothe you, but there is none warm. He that earneth wages, even if he be bagged.
Ever felt like that?
Oh, yeah.
So that doesn't sound very productive. Now let me show you what could be thought of as productive, or what is productive. And it came to pass, this is Luke 5, it came to pass that as the people pressed upon him to hear the word of God, he stood by the lake of Gennesaret, and he saw 2 fish standing by the lake, but the fishermen were gone out of them and were washing their nets. And he entered into the one ship, which was Simon's, and prayed him that he would thrust out a little from the land, and he sat down and taught the people out of the ship. Now when he had left speaking, he said unto Simon, launch out into the deep and let down your nets for a draught. And Simon answered and said unto him, Master, we have toiled all the night, have taken nothing. Nevertheless, at thy word, I will let down the net. What was he expecting to catch? Nothing. He's a commercial fisherman. They've been out there all night long, and they brought in three goldfish and a minnow. But they let it down, and when they had done this, they enclosed a great multitude of fishes, and their net brake. What's the difference between what Israel was doing? I mean, they made plans with Syria. Syria was a strong military force. It was a wealthy country. They should be able to take out Judah pretty easily. What was the difference? Why didn't they prosper?
Because they were attacking their own brothers
Yeah.
and against God's direction.
And so Simon Peter obeyed Jesus, even though every fiber of his fisherman's experience said, no way. It's late. You're tired. Just say no. But he did. And God blessed. And so we see that here. And so again, I think this was just kind of a summary statement. You set out to do this. This is what you ended up with. And then it switches gears again. Because verse 12 says, woe to the multitude of many people which make a noise like the noise of the seas, and to the rushing of the nations that make a rushing like the rushing of mighty waters. The nation shall rush like the rushing of many waters. Let's stop there. Who's this talking about? Who's rushing in like flooding waters?
And they became refugees. So I'm not sure.
Let's look at the next phrase. But God shall rebuke them, and they shall flee far off, and shall be chased as the chaff of the mountain before the wind. So this is Assyria. They're flooding in. They're making that noise you were talking about, with the guy walking home and he hears the swords clanging and the horses rushing and the people screaming. Well, they're making this noise. But what's going to happen? Well, God's going to rebuke them. They're going to flee far off. The dominant military power, the one who even laughed at Egypt and their military force, they're going to be chased as the chaff of the mountains before the wind, and like a rolling thing before the whirlwind. Do you remember what happened to the Assyrians? We've talked about it, so I'm pretty sure you do. And they woke up.
Well, not the whole nation, but
Right.
the ones that came to attack Judah, they all woke up dead.
And those that didn't wake up dead fled, including, did I write this down? I can never remember his name. Sennacherib. Remember Sennacherib who gave the challenge to Hezekiah? He fled and returned back to Syria. I mean, to Assyria. And do you remember what happened to him? He led his army to
Well,
he led his army to total failure. To total failure.
Oh, they killed him and all his kids.
His kids killed him,
oh, that's right.
but then his kids didn't reign either because he hadn't demonstrated very good leadership. I mean, up until then he had, but he went up against the God of Abraham and didn't do well. And so verse 14, and behold, at eventide trouble, and before the morning, this is verse 14. And behold, at eventide trouble, 186,000 soldiers waiting to come in the next day. And before the morning, he is not. This is the portion of them that spoil us and the lot of them that rob us. Remember, this is the Lord, but speaking through Isaiah.
Well, it would be somewhat comforting, especially if you're one of those little three berries left on the top of the tree, abandoned because it was too much work, not worth it. And to hear God telling you, people who want to spoil you, people who want to grab you,
Right.
here's what's going to happen to them.
And just to put one thing in perspective, because as we read this, it seems like it all happens at once. This was a military campaign. You know, Assyria came and they took out Syria. Then they took out Ephraim. Then they started moving that way until finally they got down to Rephaim. And then they came and they went up against Judah. This was not a 6-day war. This was a multiple month-long campaign, maybe a year war. But in one night, they went from the conquering army to they woke up and found themselves dead. And so again, the message of all of these woes is don't trust other people. Not don't be one of those people that doesn't trust anybody. That's not what we're talking about. Don't place your trust in man, because man can't deliver you. You place your trust in God. And so what have we looked at? Babylon and Assyria. Don't put your trust in them. Don't put your trust in the Philistines. Don't put your trust in the Moabites. Don't put your trust in Syria. Don't put your trust. And remember, at different times, Judah had allied with Syria. Don't put your trust in there. And if we just jump ahead, chapter 18, woe to the land shadowing with wings, which is beyond the river of Ethiopia. Chapter 19, the burden of Egypt. Excuse me. And chapter 21, Elam and Media. And so we see that, and then chapter 22, a burden about Jerusalem. But the lesson is all the people around you, don't put your trust in them, because they'll be judged. They can't come to your aid. They're going to be in trouble themselves. The lesson's true today. And in America, it's easy to put our trust in our government. Okay, maybe in the last few years, it's less easy to do that. Our military. We are, in some sense, the only superpower left in the world. Our military is the dominant military.
And technology.
Technology, oh yeah.
Our planes can see in the dark. We can send, robot bombers and stealth planes and
if you're trusting in that,
I mean, one good EMP and your stuff is done. I fully expect that either normal malfunctions, of which I haven't seen them, or an offensive weapon that disables electronics.
Yeah, and even just attack the power grid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which isn't apparently all that hard.
Yeah, apparently. So
criminal snowstorm can do that.
Well, that's true.
Very easily.
A squirrel can bring down the whole grid.
So putting our trust in, we have better technology than anybody else.
Yeah, it's foolish.
It's foolish.
Yep. And yet,
We have to look to God and stop being so secular and putting our trust in our armies and other military.
It's an arrogance. It's a pride. Oh, that sounds familiar. Because a lot of these countries that God put the burden on, it was their pride. And boy, do we have that as Americans. And even Christian nationalism, which has become a big phrase lately. You know what?
There's, those are two opposites.
They certainly have become that, haven't they? Yeah, I mean, if you're putting your trust in the fact that we're a Christian nation, that's a lot like in Ezekiel where they were putting their trust in what?
The fact that they had the temple.
The temple.
Yeah.
Yeah, the temple. God would never judge us. We have the temple.
Abraham's children.
We're a Christian nation. God would never judge us. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
If you're putting your trust in
if
that.
we are, then we should start acting like that.
Yeah. And as a nation, we're not going to start acting like that until we as Christians act like that and share Jesus with others. And could God bring a revival to America?
Good.
Absolutely. But yeah, we're far from being a Christian nation. And we better not be putting our trust there. But this is what we can trust. We can trust in God. God keeps his promises. He's a covenant-keeping God. We saw that this morning. So that was chapter 17. We finished another one. I mean, again, we could have gone in more detail, but I think you get the picture.
Well, like Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, our God is well able to save us.
Mm-hmm.
And if he does, that's great. If he doesn't, that's okay too. That's
Mm-hmm.
up to him.
Mm-hmm.
If we could have that attitude, it would do well for us.
Absolutely.
As it did well for them.
Yeah. And if he hadn't rescued them, it still would have done well for them. So it's a win-win situation.
I mean, when he said that, I think he really meant it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. All right. So no Wednesday night service. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. Lord willing, we're all back here next Sunday. I know Nanette was online, so I'm glad you were able to join us. Anybody else ever join us? Okay. Well, I'm glad, Nanette, you were able to. Have a happy Thanksgiving. And I don't know. You guys hungry yet?
I did get hungry in the afternoon. All that walking around.
We did eat at 4, but
Yeah.
There was no cream cheese.
I took it home with me kind of by accident.
wasn't there some cream cheese left?
Oh, there is no container in the fridge. Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I thought you would take that.
Well, I was gonna,
But I don't need cream cheese.
somehow it didn't come home with me.
All right. Well, we are dismissed.